Hi, and welcome to Studio 411. I'm your host, Larry Dasilva, and I feel like we've done this before, but we're back again for a brand new show, and we appreciate you joining us. Today we actually have two guests that have been on the program before, but for their first and perhaps only appearance on worldwide television, we brought together two females, two inspirational human beings, two authors, two moms, two bloggers, and many other things that I have to look at my notes to figure out. But anyway, speakers, coach, one's even a lawyer, so we're in for a lot of good conversation about some things that they have strong opinions about. Our first guest joining us from New Jersey, Julie Bond Genovese, you might recall, was on the program a while back. She is a author of the inspirational memoir Nothing Short of Joy from Baylor Publications, as well as a speaker, coach, artist, and equally as important, mom. Her website, nothingshortofjoy.com. And joining us here in studio, also returning guest, the fabulous, by the way, we have a hamster too coming from New Jersey, so if you hear that, that's just the wheel turning, not Julie, okay? We have Marilynn Halas joining us in studio, children's book author, life coach, a blogger as well, both for the Huffington Post, as well as a lawyer by trade, a founder of For Sunflower Media, a multimedia company where their mission is to empower children and parents through storytelling. And Marilynn's website, forsunflowersmedia.com. We have several new publications that Marilynn has been working on diligently. The woman doesn't sleep at night, so that's a whole other issue. But we will be talking to them about all these things. And ladies, starting with Julie, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Larry.
Yes.
Always good to be with you.
Thank you. A pleasure. And I love what you've done with your wall. Marilynn, nice of you to come back.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Very nice, very nice. And let me just, before we get into some of our topics, Marilynn, as I said, is just, she works 28 hours a day and writing and blogging and doing all sorts of things, as does Julie. We'll talk a little bit later. We'll try to squeeze in a few minutes on some of her new books that either are coming out or have already come out. Bullets in the Blue Sky, which is more of an young adult book.
Yes, that is our first foray into grown-up books.
Okay.
Still stories that I hope will give people some perspective, some characters to remind them of themselves and maybe find the hero inside themselves.
Okay. And then, of course, I'm surrounded by some other ones that are geared more towards young children, young adults, teenagers, whatever the case may be. Fuzz whippers love being fuzz whippers. And I meant to bring my fuzz whipper that Marilynn gave me, and I treasure it, and it gets me through many a day. So, you know, some people rub like, was it Bogart did in that movie where he played with the marbles? Well, I have my fuzz whipper, so I thank
I'm glad
you for
to hear that.
Hot Spots is another book that Marilynn has done, and The Zoo in You, that's a new series, correct?
Yes, that's going to pick up in many ways where Fuzz Whippers finishes. Fuzz Whippers is more for preschoolers and little children who enjoy being read to, and The Zoo in You is sort of for that next level where it's emerging readers and people who are just about ready to read for themselves.
And the last one, I Love You More Than...
I Love You More Than Wiggly Worms.
Wiggly Worms.
Yes, and you haven't lived until you have read that aloud to a room full of kindergartners.
There you go.
That is just joy.
Now the Fuzz Whippers, what's up with that? Are we going to do a prequel to the Fuzz Whippers, like Fuzz Whippers in the Womb or something?
I'm not prepared for that
no?
yet.
Okay.
I'll have to. I will give that the consideration
I
it
just
deserves.
saw that, and I'm blanking on her name, the one that did the Harry Potter series. All of a sudden now she's,
J.K. Rowling, yes.
The money is running out, and now she's starting, I've got to do a prequel, which, you know, again, is just a whole
well,
other
she's
thing.
learning from George Lucas, right?
I
That
guess,
worked out pretty well for him. So
I didn't care for those three, but that's for another show. And that's the 411, as my friend Glenn told me to say. All right, ladies, so let's start with some topics here. Hot topics, not hot spots, but in some ways, yes. Bullying, I know that's a subject that Marilynn has talked to me both on air and also privately about. Again, just give me your thoughts on that. That's something I know you talk about, you blog a lot about.
Yes.
That despite when we were kids and our kids' kids and their kids. It just, bullying seems to still be, pervasive throughout this country of ours. Why is that, and what can we do about it?
I think perhaps the biggest part of bullying is the part that's often overlooked. I think people are very focused on the child being bullied, but there's more to it than that. There's also the parents, there's also the family members, not only of the child being bullied, but of the bully. And how does it get to that stage? How is it that 15 or 20 other human beings will look the other way? And so my approach has always been beyond just working with one person who's experiencing the bullying, because that can be devastating, no question, but to reach out to the community around, because the only way that I know to effectively end bullying is to allow it to become transparent, spoken about, and something that we teach our children as a community. This is not who we are, we're better than this, and sort of pull the bully up, because that way their insecurities don't need to be projected onto other people, not just the victim, but also the kid who is a victim of their own bullying.
Yeah.
It's a different approach, but I find it very effective.
Julie, any thoughts on that? That either from experience, your children perhaps, or things in your life that you can recall, that or thoughts that you have on that subject?
Yes, I've had tons of personal experience with that, and I like what Marilynn said about the projection, because really the bully is also a victim. It just doesn't look that way because they assume actions that look powerful, that look hurtful, and they are. I certainly was hurt as a child, but I was never taught either by my parents, my teachers, anyone, that the bully is reactive because they are coming from a place of unworthiness as well. So when the society turns around, whether it's the school or other kids, and tries to punish the bully, as in a lot of movies, the bully ends up getting his just desserts, and that feels very rewarding for those of us who were hurt, and yet it really isn't the compassionate answer, and it doesn't solve the problem for anyone in the long run. Because what I've found, when my book came out, for instance, and there were a few people who contacted me on Facebook. And I remember the first one, I'll call him Ed, he friended me, and I thought, what? He was mean, he pulled tricks all the time, I had a lot of negative memories of Ed. And yet I thought, when I saw his name, I don't want to be friends with him. But on the other hand, what can I lose on Facebook? I can always unfriend him. So as soon as I friended him back, he wrote me this long, apology, I guess, of wishing he had known back when we were young that he would regret his actions, and that they would, he would hold onto them for so long, and they would make him feel bad, and that he realizes what he did. It's a long, long story, but essentially it gave me, from his testimony and several other boys, it was not girls that I had trouble with, it was boys. And I realized it's really true that those who strike out are asking for help, and they need a much different approach, like Marilyn's talking about. It's really a communal problem. It's a culture of bullying, so it isn't just the bully that needs help.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah. And of course, in today's society, especially with social media and instantaneous gratification, or whatever, spontaneity of video and texting and everything else, I mean, you can't go a day without seeing on the news or on the internet, a brawl at a local mall. If we used to say film at 11, well, film is right now. I mean, they're practically filming it as it happens. Mm-hmm. Or I just saw one where it was at a McDonald's or a Burger King, and it's almost this thing of an obsession with this. We need this gratification. Wow, that's great. That's great. What's great about it? I mean, these are horrible mm-hmm. things. And I just think it just perpetuates, all this negativity that goes on. And this is on our own country. We're not even talking about overseas occurrences, Mm-hmm. So I don't know. Julie, something you talked to me about, again, segueing into teaching kids life skills, which are currently not taught in school. We can't even say the Pledge of Allegiance. So what exactly are we teaching in school these days? Because I just heard a very disturbing fact that today, this morning, actually driving into work, that 60% of our high schoolers are unfit and not ready for college.
Wow.
60%. See, even the hamster is disturbed at that. Did you hear that? You see? See? Give them another nut and continue on, please.
Some of what we're just talking about with bullying and general sense of powerlessness in our society that causes, this brawling or this reactive nature, striking out, aggression, in many ways starts with our sort of authoritarian paradigm in school, which is essentially saying that the adults, get to say how everything goes. We don't consult with children. We don't really look back on our own childhood to know what really hurt, what was destructive, and instead we just keep doing the same thing instead of questioning the society and the quote-unquote ideals. Now, college is all fine and well. I went to a great college, but if that's the only thing that is motivating parents and children and teachers, it's the standardized test, it's the quantifying what they've learned, that isn't bringing joy. That's not allowing for an expressive sense of self, a creativity, an empowered person. It's allowing for a lot of conforming, having people be like we say they should be, and it's a very sort of left brain approach, and there isn't room so much anymore for the creative side, the right brain, the intuitive, and the life skills. Like you were mentioning, that we really don't teach in school what would so benefit our overall happiness and sense of empowerment. I mean, look at the divorce rate, and why is there nothing about relationships and dealing with for instance, the bullying issue, or just so the kids are so interested, they want to learn about relationships, and yet it's not talked about. So, or divorce. So many kids are going through that, and they need support. Instead, it's more important to learn algebra, and I don't get it. I don't agree with it, but I can't single-handedly change it. I wish I could.
Marilynn, any thoughts?
Oh yes, I have one or two thoughts. I agree so much with what you're saying. I think children are at their best individuals. It's so interesting when you look at a group of kindergartners and you tell them that you have an item in your bag and it is a paperclip, and you ask them, can they think of some things that they might be able to do with a paperclip? And when they've done that with kindergartners, they will come up literally with hundreds of ideas. Hundreds of ideas. They have great questions. What size is the paperclip? What's it made of? Is it magnetic? I mean, their mind is completely open, their imaginations are engaged, and they're empowered to speak up. You ask the same question to kids in high school, and if they all answer, which many will not, many just are completely disaffected and shut down by that point, they will say, well, you use it to clip paper together, period. And I think that is a terrible injustice. I think education at its best is about empowerment to meet expectations. I don't think there's anything wrong with expectations. You have to meet certain skill sets. That is part of life. But to empower a child to do that, to have discipline in a way that is positive. One of my favorite ways of expressing to a child that behavior or that tone or that way of treating someone else is not acceptable is not to say wrong, no, don't, but rather to say, you're better than that. That's so far beneath who you are. And that cheapens you and them and your relationship. And I know next time you can make a better choice. When people speak to children that way, they literally physically rise up in their seats. You can look at them grow right in front of you. It may be the very first time someone told them, you're better than that. Things like that they're very simple skills. And I think the more they're employed, the more they're taught both to our educators and our children, then the more that becomes the mores of that microcosm, that school. And then from there, our communities. I think that's so important, because truthfully, that's how you learn algebra. You can't focus on the hunt for X if you're really concerned about the notes and the texts that are being spoken about behind you. The only way to learn anything is to create a safe space. And the only way to create a safe space is to get comfortable in your own skin, both the educators and their students. So I'm excited to see the changes that are really bringing that into play, because they're very effective and they're very inexpensive and very simple.
We're joined here for the hour on Studio 411, joining us from New Jersey, Julie Genovese, author, mom, speaker, life coach, blogger, as we mentioned earlier, and to my left in studio, Marilynn Halas, again, very similar traits, blogger, author, et cetera, and again, I kind of saw them when we both had them on separately as kind of being an interesting combination. So battle to the death, I thought. Oh. So we said, no, only kidding. But a pleasure to have them both on. And now, from what you were saying, Marilynn and Julie, it sounds like, of course, the age-old discussion that, again, a lot of these methods have to be instituted at a young age. If you don't get them young, it's just like when we were always taught about languages. If you don't learn how to speak a language, then you're not going to be like the one in Europe that speaks 6 languages. We have enough trouble barely speaking English in this country, and these are people born in this country. Spanish, French, all these languages are being, sometimes French especially, totally phased out of this country. By the time we're long gone, it'll be, English, and Spanish, and an occasional Latin, somewhere, if they can round up someone to teach it. But in terms of overall, again, all these things, these perceptions, methods have to be taught at a young age.
I think ideally, anything you learn at a young age becomes a part of human nature and a part of who you are. But the beauty of neuroplasticity is that you can learn anything new at any age if you're open to it. The brain is fabulously malleable. Look at a stroke patient who perhaps cannot tie their shoes with both hands anymore, and yet they're able, the brain will compensate and find new pathways. And I believe the same is true when it comes to how we treat each other and the way that we think about ourselves. I say to parent groups sometimes, that voice in your head, that was actually put there, probably by your teachers and parents. So what is the tape? What is the voice? What's the message that you're going to leave your children? It may be that you've had such an idyllic childhood, God bless you, that you want the same messages for your child. However, it's possible, in fact, maybe even likely, that you would like a different message. So when you make that conscious choice, now the world is yours no matter what age you are. It's just a question of making that decision, that split second before you react, to respond instead of react. Makes all the difference. And that's a learned skill like anything else, no matter how old you are.
That leads me to my next point, to have Julie lead off. How creativity empowers and heals. Hamster.
Amen. Yeah, and I completely agree with what Marilyn's saying, because we were all raised with certain mindsets that were negative and unhelpful, and it's absolutely possible, and there are examples all the time of people pulling themselves up by their bootstraps and out of a difficult situation, and realizing that it's our own beliefs that are in the way. And so we're in our own way more than what we learned or what our parents taught us that wasn't helpful, or teachers. So the potential is always there, and those qualities of love and goodness and kindness, I think those are actually natural to us when we aren't inhibited. So in clearing away, what blocks the view, those things can come back to the fore. But creativity, I've just found for myself personally, and then I began working with others in creativity, and how it is just so remarkably healing on every level. I lost the use of my right arm many years ago now, and I had to give up my freelance art business, and it was crushing, it was brutal. But very long story short, as I began writing with my left hand on the keyboard, it was so cathartic to start talking about all the things that had happened to me, you know, the bullying and the medical problems and my dwarfism and everything that I'd been holding on to, like very heavy, awful baggage and armor, as that started to slip away from me and out onto the computer screen, my shoulder began to feel better, and there was really no reason for it. The doctors said, you know, I needed both shoulders replaced. The fluid in there was gone. It was bone on bone. And yet, here I am, 20 years later, I have that shoulder still. I don't have my hips and knees. Those are replaced, but my shoulder healed as I expressed what was stuck inside me. And I've heard this story now over and over from writers, from artists, dancers, gardeners, you know, whatever the creativity that really stirs your soul and makes you feel alive, and that creativity can be a huge box. It's like just living. It's living and loving what you're doing and expressing who you are. That can heal on every level. So it's such good news, and it's so exciting. And the creativity that speaks to each of us personally is the one to go for the healing.
Marilyn, any thoughts?
Oh, I believe so much in creativity. You know, I don't think there's a musician alive who would tell you that they are not healed every time they perform, every time they allow that music to come through them, whether it's the music of pain or joy. I think the same is true for artists of any medium. I know for myself, to write these stories is very, very, not just a creative endeavor, but it is my heart and my soul in each of these stories. Parts of each character become as almost like friends, and watching them experience things. And then the interesting part for me is getting to that stage where, for instance, in Hotspots, which is very dear to my heart, I was bullied as a child, and it was very hard to write, to revisit those dark places that I had convinced myself I was finished with and would never again return to. But to have the courage to go there, for me, required actually 2 books. One, Hotspots, that I was working on, and the other, an open journal beside me, so that when I got to a certain scene or a certain point where I knew this is where she needs to go now, and I did not want to go with her, I could put in my journal, you know, what's behind that? And 3 sentences later, proceed. And I think that is what creativity is all about. It's the whole point of putting your healing out there for someone else to heal from. It's a great generosity, no matter what the medium.
Well, I'll add my 2 cents again on a much smaller scale, I'm afraid to say, but again, doing this show and again, working with the fine people that we work with, the fine guests that we have, you know, it's really kind of a return to, you know, things I had done years ago. And again, you know, kind of, it's a lot of work, as we've talked about, and it's a lot of energy and effort, but again, the fulfillment, you know, what comes of it, and the hopefully the happiness in the faces of the guests and of the crew members. Again, you couldn't ask for better people, and just, you know, that kind of maybe makes my shoulder feel a little better too. But yeah, and then the next morning comes, but that's another show, right? And that's the 411, right, Glenn? There you go. And speaking of 411, you're joining us here for the hour on Studio 411. To my left, Marilynn Halas, children's book author, blogger, lawyer, founder of For Sunflowers Media. And to my extreme left, Julie Genovese, author of the inspirational memoir, Nothing Short of Joy. And just in that last segment, you've got a big chunk of, you know, a lot of the things that Julie covers, and again, so much more, again, of her, you know, struggles and perseverance, and you know, very uplifting book. So, you know, it's something that you know, I enjoy, and I think it's good to sometimes to, you know, go back and look at again. Just
Absolutely.
like I get that, my fuzz whippers with Marilynn. We'll have to send Julie one. So
Absolutely.
She's like, what the heck are they talking about?
Yeah, what is it?
Where is the fuzz whippers?
Well,
we have it right here. Is this right here?
It's a tactile little toy. And the beauty of the fuzz whipper is that it's very, very soft. And so if you rub it, you feel better. And so what we've done over the years is we've shared them with many children who may have had anxiety for one reason or another. For example, we had a little girl who had to attend her very first funeral. her uncle had died. And so she was anxious about that and naturally very sad. And so what is a healthy way to accept those emotions and grow through them? So what she did, actually, her mom put a little fuzz whipper in her new shoes. And she scooped it up and rubbed it and kept it with her all day. And it really gave her a little bit of peace in that storm. And so that's what fuzz whippers are really all about, no matter how old you are. It's a lot of fun, actually, especially as an attorney, to go into business meetings. And, you know, very serious, very, very important and powerful business people will take a look at them. And I always leave them just within reach. And it's fabulous to me that never have any of them made it home with me. Without exception. Whomever the person is, once they touch it, they'll ask, do you mind if I just hold on to this? I say, no, of course not. That fuzz whipper chose you. By all means, please.
I was going to say, kids are putting them in their lunchbox. Well, you know, the lawyers are slipping them into the briefcase. So,
Absolutely.
So,
and you know what?
Stodgy no more.
That's right. That's why it works at any age. We're all at the end of the day, no matter how old we
so
are.
So there's hope for all of us, right? And that
Most of us,
that leads me into my my next subject, celebrating small moments as a practice in mindfulness and finding joy. We'll start with Julie.
Oh, wow.
And you certainly have had many moments, small, medium, and large.
Many moments what?
Many moments in your life, small, medium, and large. No pun intended. Yeah. That you've had to deal with. So, you know.
Being fun-sized myself. Mindfulness is just an incredible tool or ability to just remember our fullness and the greatness inside of us by not being in the past, not being in the future, but this moment right now, you know, taking a deep breath and appreciating just something as simple and yet life-giving as a deep breath, or contemplating, for instance, you know, a soft cat or our dog, or, you know, a fuzz whipper or whatever, so that it brings us into the moment where we are fine, we're safe, we're good, we're lovable. And in the past, there are examples where that isn't true, or we didn't feel that, and so that can take us out, and the future can be scary, and that can take us away from our more infinite self, our soul. So being mindful about this moment right here, and that there's love right here and an open heart now, is it's overlooked because our society is, you know, in a race, and we're always doing the next thing and multitasking, and I have lists and lists and lists of lists. And just taking a deep breath, or even just talking on this show and being fully here and present, is reconnecting with who we really are, something bigger and brighter than this body or these problems or our education or our career or whatever. So it's a big, and there's so much attention to it right now. It's wonderful because mindfulness can bring you to feelings that aren't pleasant, that need healing, that need attention. And then just beyond them is the truth of us, which is love and loving, and it is joy and peace. So there's a pathway that I start to reroute it, at least I have in my brain, where I'm not busy in my fears or in my what ifs. I'm just here now and appreciating the simple things that aren't really simple at all, but are overlooked because we're busy grabbing for something else, something more. And we're enough right now.
Any thoughts, Marilynn?
I love what you said about being enough right now. That's one of the things that I talk with families about quite a bit. So much of childhood is about becoming, you know, and one of the most dangerous words that is used with children, in my opinion, is the word until. You know, you may have that after this. You must wait until you have attained a certain age, completed a certain task, earned a certain grade. And what I love to do is teach children about this moment, this small moment, Maybe you're making a new friend. Maybe you're seeing something in a different way. Maybe for the very first time, you can exhale in the classroom that used to make you feel nervous. Maybe there's a million other things. Maybe you're going to write this amazing story and you're going to use this moment. So be here, experience it. And while a child does that, their blood pressure lowers. They relax. That prepares them to learn. Now they're actually with the rest of their class. That builds community. That builds compassion for themselves and someone else. And also, very usefully, self-awareness, so that when they get used to being in a moment, looking for something to celebrate, not only are you training a child in gratitude and mindfulness, but you're also giving them a self-awareness to know when they're whipping themselves into a froth, that that's a story you're telling yourself. That's not actually real. It hasn't happened yet. And so you can back off that. That's a great skill, especially when you live with teenagers or adults. As kids get older, it only gets more important that they learn how to recognize those small moments and be in them. Because the small moments that you can celebrate, that's the whole point. That was why you studied for the test. That was why you worked so hard. That was why you sacrificed. It was for these small moments. Because the big moments, there's maybe a handful in a lifetime. But the small moments, there are literally hundreds every day if you train yourself to find them. You know, I think that's really important.
And you ladies both say that, again, stress as is correct, you know, as far as kids, young adults, whatever. But these are practices that, again, I know I certainly need to line up in a line wherever they're handing this stuff out. Is that even as adults? So I think, you know, we all need to realize it's just not something that we're espousing just for, you know, a 3-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 19-year-old. These are things that we all, I think, need to continually work on. Otherwise, we wouldn't all be in some of the states that we get ourselves in,
absolutely.
myself included.
You know, there's an expression, no one is an island. And in some ways, it's easy to feel as though you are isolated. And these are the tools that build the bridges that allow you to reach not only to yourself, to know who you are, but then to come across and relate to another human being. When you understand what you are feeling, it's much easier to build empathy for what someone else is feeling. And to be able to ask really important questions like, how is that for you? Because maybe in your shoes I would feel afraid or frustrated, but maybe for you, you feel excited and you're anticipating the joy of it. And learning that is, I think, a great tool for all of us to really build those bridges to connect with other people and feel less alone. And that's a very beautiful way to live your life.
A couple of Jersey girls joining us here on this edition of Studio 411, who just met for the first time. Julie Genovese joining us from New Jersey. Website nothingshortofjoy.com, and across the way from me, Marilynn Halas, for sunflowersmedia.com, joining us here on the hour for Studio 411. Quick moment, quick answer from both of you. We'll start with Marilynn. It doesn't have to be famous people. It can be someone, relative, neighbor, friend. Give me 3 inspirations growing up. Famous or not so famous?
Well, that's easy for me. My Aunt Moya, for sure. She taught me when your back's against the wall, you have nowhere to go but forward. And I can't tell you how often I have heard her in my head, and she's right. Also, my grandmother. You know, when Hitler bombed Northern Ireland, she had her 7 children under the stairs hiding. And she was able to tell them stories in that moment. And so my aunts and uncles remember the Blitz in Belfast as a fun evening, which is absurd and a testament to just what an amazing storyteller. Right. And then I would say also my husband, because firstly, he puts up with me for a long time, which is baffling, but also he has a wonderful way of building those bridges, reaching out to people, and really with a humility that understands that perhaps their experience is different than his, and a curiosity to understand what that feels like. And that for me has just been an invaluable model, and that's a help.
No comment from the hamster. Julie, what are your 3 inspirations?
Yeah, that he is really chirping, isn't he?
Yeah. We're going to get the, the ASPCA down there if you don't take care of this thing. But 3 inspirations, famous, not so famous.
My mom is definitely way up on my list. She especially after losing my dad in March, just watching her and how she handles grief and as a part of life, and that her feelings and expressions of pain are temporary, and they move on, and they can be transformed into something positive. She astounds me with her ability to do that, and I didn't appreciate it as a child. I had a lot of issues in my own mind. We didn't communicate well when I was young, and yet I must have been observing and absorbing her positive nature, her ability to, look on the bright side and just take a challenge and turn it into an adventure. She used to say when our car would break down, which was a lot, she'd say, "Well, we're on an adventure." And we'd all go, "What?" But now I know why. That's really a practical approach.
She was celebrating. She was celebrating small moments, is what I think it was.
Totally, she is the present moment mama. She really is.
Finding joy. There you go.
And she raised 6 kids, and she did it without a lot of, fuss. I don't know how. I have 2, and I think I fuss more.
Marilynn has 4. Do you know?
Was Wayne Dyer, who recently passed away, or I should say passed on to the great beyond. He was such a powerhouse in, probably 20 years ago. I was listening to his tapes, and I'd put on my headphones with my Walkman back when we had Walkman, and I would listen to his wisdom and his inspiration when I would go out into the world, and I would be so afraid of what I would bump into and who and how I would handle my life. And I knew I had to change the tapes in my own heart and mind, and he really helped replace the old negativity. And then he ended up endorsing my book, and he called me on stage when I went to his event. He said I could promote my book there, and then he called me on stage. So he had such belief in me. I was more nervous than I'd ever been in my life to stand before 1,000 people and to speak my truth, which was very, very new to me. And because he gave me that opportunity and believed in me, and I did it, it just changed something. It just changed. Like Marilynn was talking about, that neuroplasticity that was saying, "You're crap, you're not enough." It suddenly was, Wayne Dyer thinks I'm enough. And then that triggered that inner place where I knew I was, and I knew I could be more.
And number 3?
Number 3.
Pee Wee Herman, perhaps? No, okay, just a guess.
Gosh, there's so many, but I'll say Bernie Siegel. He's a Western doctor, an oncologist, turned to sort of Eastern methods of healing, and I just found incredible inspiration in his books. I remember Love, Medicine, and Miracles, and all about, using the best of both worlds, the best of Western medicine and the best of Eastern and alternative medicine, and how to really, love the issue you're dealing with instead of fight cancer, to embrace the journey. That may sound crazy to someone, but it's just it's a mindset switch, and he was somebody who really inspired me. He still does.
Marilynn Halas, Julie Bond Genovese joining us for the remainder of this hour on Studio 411. A little fact, and then leading me into my next point. I just heard recently that we'll say, again, probably 8 to 18, but I'm sure it goes beyond the age of 18, spend in excess of 9 hours a day, including during sleep, I may add, on social media / handheld or electronic devices. You can comment on that, but also it leads me into my next point, reading at all ages. I grew up as a boy, again, only child, used to love to go to the library, get books. I can remember some of them as if it was yesterday, and it's hard to believe it's been at least 2 years. But anyway, reading at all ages. But yet I found another stat the other day that 70% of the people in this country have not been in a bookstore in 5 years. So you have all these things. So that leads me to my next topic for you ladies, reading at all ages. We'll start with Marilynn.
Well, I I believe that kids are still reading, but differently. You know, first of all, anything that they're doing on those devices requires them to read, requires them to write, requires them to express themselves in a way that is more fluid, more efficient, and certainly more constant. I think the important thing is to teach them the way you would teach them to brush their teeth, that you teach them, you know, this is a tool and it can be a useful tool, but you must control this. You must never allow it to control you. And when you can teach a child to make that distinction, then the electronic becomes their servant, their tool. And in that case, I think it's a wonderful gift. It's very useful. They can study things, access things, entertain themselves, read a book that interests them instantly. Those are wonderful things. However, like any other tool, it can be misused. And if it is misused, it can be very unhealthy and very detrimental to a child or an adult or a whole family. And so I think it really comes down to balance and teaching our children these tools from the beginning to say, it's like a toothbrush. It's very useful if you use it to take care of yourself and clean your teeth. It can be a real problem if you use it to clean a toilet, for example. That's not a good use of a toothbrush. Now everybody's going to be sick, right? It's the same thing with electronics. You know, they have a place. The world has changed, and so it becomes like every other tool that human beings have created and then mastered. I think that's kind of where we are right now. We're struggling for mastery. We know how to work it, but have we mastered it? Does it serve us? And when you get to that stage, then I think it's a terrific thing to access books immediately, or to, if you don't understand a word, to highlight it and find out more, or to reach out perhaps to the author or to someone else who's enjoyed the book, or to find out more on a topic. I mean, one of the things I teach my own children is, if there's a news story that interests you, find at least 3 sources covering it, because then you'll get a clue. Where those 3 stories overlap lies the truth. And those are very useful skills that I never would have had access to as a child. You know, we had 3 channels. So I think it definitely has the potential to be quite wonderful. But like anything else, we must teach our children not just to use it, but to be the master of the tool.
And I appreciate that home improvement tip. I wrote that down.
Did you write that,
Yes,
please?
thank
Because
you.
it's
Yes.
important.
Yes, I'm going to see my dentist tomorrow.
Yes, well, your wife asked me to pass that along to you.
Julie, not on my comment, but on what Marilynn had to say. What do you make of all this? I'm a little more dubious about because again, I don't think on social media or on these electronic devices, I don't think we're reading War and Peace here. I got to be brutally honest. So I spend time on the computer, and I do find that you kind of gravitate from one thing to the other. Yes, even as a kid, I mean, we were lucky if we had an encyclopedia, Britannica or a dictionary, that kind of stuff.
But were you reading War and Peace on your trips to the library as a child?
I was reading books that were 300, 400, 500 pages.
300, 400, and 500 pages, that still happens. Those are Harry Potters today.
Okay.
I'm just curious to know, because God bless you, you must have been
quite
a prodigy.
I'd love to. Somehow I fell between the cracks and became a perennial C+ student.
No, I don't believe it for a minute.
Yes, absolutely. Remember, only child syndrome. But anyway, on that 411 note, Julie, continue. So agree, disagree, your own feelings on the multitude of subject matter, including the toothbrush, toilet that we talked about.
Yeah, you got that one all wrong, right? I completely agree with Marilynn. I love how she used the word servant, because it really is, it's a mindset. Again, it's every generation has its new scary, oh my God, the devil's going to get a hold of you in that social media. And it's the way we use it, because I've seen my kids blossom in certain areas because of their ability to use the internet so well. So, and I noticed that the times when I'm frightened about their use, if I realize they've been on longer than I think is healthy, and I get upset, it's because I'm feeling out of control, not because they really are. So I have to calm down and make sure that we're talking on the same level about why we're using that for mastery and it's not master over us, and that's a really good distinction, and why we never want to put all our attention on something that essentially can't ever love you back. It's not people, it's not relationships, and yet it can help build them. I know my kids have friends online who they haven't met, and they are building a certain type of communication and ability through that. So it really has its ups and downs. It has its good and bad. but overall it's here to stay, and so we might as well use it to its highest good, and hopefully teach our kids to be doing that as well. As long as I maintain a sane attitude about it, they seem to as well.
Okay. To jump on one of those comments, what about the feeling amongst people I talk to that, again, in part due to this, heightened and sophisticated and speedy methods of the transportation, hopefully learning, that again, young people today, to quote others I've talked to, have limited social skills. Obviously, it sounds like you disagree because they're interacting, but I'm saying have no social skills to do what we are doing here.
I don't see that as
No.
true at all.
Okay.
But I've heard that said, and I know there are pictures on the net of kids in a group and everybody's staring at their phone, and then that's used as a reason to say, see, this is crippling us, this is making us worse. I don't find that with my kids. They're very interactive, and they don't, of course, we don't have them at dinner time. We don't, so they understand there is a line there. I'm sure there are people who are abusing it, but it's not something we can eliminate, and I don't know what the solution is there, except in each family, is to continue teaching it, that it is this tool, and it can be for the better or for the worse, depending on how we look at it. We can't look at it as bad and try to eliminate it without it becoming the forbidden fruit that then they want to be on when the lights are out and the covers are over, so there is a balance for sure.
Jumping, again, just piggybacking on this because I find this subject interesting as well as everything we've talked about today. Both of you as parents, you don't have to say exactly with your own kids, but in terms of your expertise, I'm a kid. What age am I allowed to have a cell phone? We'll jump to Marilynn.
I think it depends a lot on our lifestyle. Whether you're with a caregiver all day,
Okay.
whether you are traveling perhaps on a public bus, whether you are in the city and taking a train or a subway, that's a completely different circumstance than if you move from my kitchen to the back seat of the car where I drive you to school and collect you at the end of the day. And so I really think, like everything with parenting, you must follow your instincts and adjust your care to your child and your circumstances in that moment. The other thing is, guess what? You can move. Maybe what works very well for child number 1 and number 2, the circumstances are so different by the time child 3 rolls around that maybe it is a different set of circumstances. Just consider for a moment the size of cell phones, how they've changed so much. And so they're much more accessible. And also the reasons you're carrying a cell phone. There are so many things available. Truthfully, they're very rarely used as telephones, especially by our children. You said earlier the social skills and the lack thereof in some cases. And I think what has developed is a new set of social skills. There are new ways of communicating that send messages that I would not have been able to send at 11 or 15. They're different. These children express themselves in a completely different way with subtleties that perhaps not everyone else fully understands, because we are, certainly in my generation, digital immigrants, but our children are natives. And so for them, speaking about foreign languages, this is a foreign language and they are fluent. It is intuitive to them in a way that for me, it will always be one step removed. So perhaps it's a new set of social skills that they're developing. Again, as long as it serves them, like anything else, like sending a letter or email or a text. As long as it's serving you, as long as the video that you're watching is something that is useful for you, entertaining, empowering, makes you happy in some way or gives you something to share with your friends later, that's completely different than watching something that diminishes you. And truthfully, that is not a new choice we make. We made those choices as kids in the library. We make those choices as kids watching television. It's just a different tool.
Short answer, Julie, what age? As far as cell phone?
I don't have a set age either, because my 15-year-old hasn't needed a phone because he communicates via his iPad with Skyping so he hasn't asked for one or needed one. And my youngest, 11, would like one, but we don't see the necessity yet. So it really does depend, and each child is an incredibly unique individual with a one and only fingerprint, and I can't put an age on that kind of thing, or on most anything. In fact, I love what Marilynn was talking about, how they really, kids of this generation are cable ready. They get it. They look at my husband and I, my kids, like, what? You don't get that? So we'll always be a little behind, and some of it we do have to take, accept their lead on it. It's always under discussion in the house, so that's important, to keep the lines of communication open. That's most important.
If I could just add one thing to that, I love what you said, and I think it's true that the communication is always ongoing. And one of the most important things you do, again, to take a step back from reacting and responding instead, and by that I mean take a step back from your knee-jerk reaction, think a thought, choose what you would like as your outcome, and then proceed in that direction, because that may be a completely different direction than you would have reacted to a moment ago. But if you can do that, one of the greatest questions you can ask your child when you're concerned about their electronic use is, are you someone I can trust? Does it matter to you if I can trust you? Because at the end of the day, we're parents, and you don't really want to be in a position of having to police all the time. At some point, you will be in a cafeteria or in a restaurant, and I will not be there to say, make sure there's a rainbow on your plate and you've taken some vegetables. At some point, I want to raise a child who knows I have a human body, and it works better when I nourish it in a certain way. It's the same thing with anything else that we give them to nourish them, ideally. Do you want to be someone that I can trust? Because if you do, in this moment, you have a choice to make. And understand that the consequences of that choice will dictate whether you are someone I can trust. And I think that's a very empowering moment for a child when they reach that age of reason where they can make those determinations.
I tell you, I am going to go home and I will do nothing but write notes for the next 6 months to a year. And then actually, to put these shows together is very interesting, because again, with these lovely ladies, is that you just have to kind of follow their messages via their posts, Huffington Post, or various social media sites. Again, Marilynn Halas, Julie Bond, Genovese. All you have to do, again, what I do is type in the names, and next thing you know, name, rank, and serial number, and everything that's going on in their lives comes to the forefront. As we wrap up this terrific hour of Studio 411, again, Marilynn to my left here in studio, some of her new books, Bullets in the Blue Sky, The Fuzz Whippers Are At It Again. We'll be waiting for the prequel where they meet the Star Wars or Harry Potter people in the dream sequence. Hot Spots, The Zoo in You, and also, what was that? I Love You More Than What?
Wiggling Worms.
Wiggling Worms.
Yes.
I'll be having nightmares about that tonight.
You won't.
And 30 seconds, Julie, any projects coming up before we say goodbye?
Any projects? I am in the midst of teaching my CPR for the Creative Soul course. It's an online course for creative souls that need some empowerment and energizing our joy and ditching the perfectionist. So that's been a really exciting foray, online teaching instead of speaking in person. And I have a free ebook at my website, Release the Block, So Creativity Rocks. So that gives a really good intro to the work I'm doing right now.
Very good. And Julie's website, nothingshortofjoy.com. Marilynn's website, sunflowersmedia.com. Ladies, we will have to do it again. Jersey Girls reunite somewhere down the road. I thank you for joining me, and I'm indebted to have both of you join us. So thank you. And thank you for watching this episode of Studio 411. And till next time, we look forward to get together with you again. Larry Dasilva, your host. Have a great week.